The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension, papers shuffling, low whispers among the crowd, and the faint sound of a gavel striking in another room. Judge Eleanor Hayes sat tall at the bench, her face calm and focused. Just another case, she thought, another day in court. The bailiff stood and called out, "The state of Louisiana versus James Anderson." Eleanor shifted slightly, her hands resting on the smooth oak surface before her. She glanced at the charges listed: assault, robbery, resisting arrest. A familiar sadness pulled at her chest. Another young man lost to the system. But when the defendant walked in, everything changed. The man in handcuffs wasn't a stranger. He was James Anderson. Her James. Her breath caught as memories came rushing in. Long summer days racing bikes through the dusty streets of Hammond, Louisiana. Late-night talks beneath the old magnolia tree. Promises they made as kids, to always be there for each other, no matter what. But this man wasn't the boy she remembered. His back was hunched, his face older and worn by life. Still, his eyes, those deep, soulful eyes, were the same. Eleanor's fingers trembled on the gavel. For the first time in her career, she hesitated. The courtroom seemed to close in around her. James looked up. His face showed both surprise and sadness. Recognition flashed in his eyes, but just for a second. Then he looked away, head bowed. The room fell silent, waiting. Eleanor forced herself to speak. "Mr. Anderson, you are charged with assault and robbery. How do you plead?" His voice was rough and low. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Her heart raced. She wanted to stop everything, to ask what had happened to him, how their lives had gone in such different directions. But she was a judge. She had to stay in control. "Proceed," she said, her voice steady, though her hands were not. As the prosecutor began the opening statement, Eleanor's thoughts kept spinning. This wasn't just another case. This was James, and she had to find a way to separate her past from the present before it was too late. Her vision blurred as her mind drifted back to a time before the robe, before the bench. Back to when she and James were just two kids from different sides of Hammond, not far apart in miles, but divided by the unspoken lines of a segregated town. Her family's house had a neat yard and a white fence. James lived at the end of a dirt road in a weathered house surrounded by fields. Their friendship had been unusual. She remembered the first time they met, at a creek where she'd wandered too far from home. James was fishing, his line caught in the weeds. She'd helped him untangle it, and that moment started years of secret adventures and shared dreams. Lying in the grass one night, James had said, "Eleanor, you ever think about leaving? Really leaving? Going somewhere they don't stare at us just for being together?" She'd laughed then, brushing off the idea. But James had been serious. Even as a child, he saw how unfair the world could be, especially for someone like him. Their bond grew, even with the whispers, the judgment, and the stares. But it was always under pressure, like a weight they couldn't shake. Then one day, it all came crashing down. It was the summer before high school. Her father caught them sitting together on the porch. His voice was cold, full of warning. "Eleanor, get inside, now." She had paused that day, looking at James, who stood frozen in place. "Go on," he had said softly, his voice heavy with sadness. "I'll see you around." But they never did, not really. Her father had forbidden her from seeing James again, and not long after, James's family moved away. Eleanor buried herself in school, letting her dreams pull her far from Hammond. She made it to law school, chasing ideas of fairness and justice, but she never forgot the boy who had once shown her what true courage looked like. Now, sitting on the judge's bench, she wondered what had happened to him after that day, after she'd walked inside and left their friendship behind. His record told part of the story. A few arrests for small crimes, petty theft, loitering. Nothing that screamed violence. But how much could a few lines on a rap sheet really say about a person's life? The prosecutor's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. He was laying out the charges. James was accused of assaulting a store clerk during a robbery at a convenience store in Baton Rouge. The clerk had minor injuries. The register was emptied. James had been found just a few blocks away with the cash allegedly on him. Eleanor studied James as the prosecutor spoke. His shoulders slouched, his hands were folded in front of him, but his face gave nothing away. Did he really do it? Or was there more to the story than what they were being told? Court adjourned for lunch, and Eleanor headed to her chambers to collect her thoughts. Her assistant, Margaret, entered with a concerned look. "Judge Hayes, are you all right? You seemed a little distracted," Margaret said gently. Eleanor paused. Should she tell Margaret the truth? Would it be unprofessional to admit she knew the man on trial? Instead, she simply said, "I'm fine, just a lot on my mind." But she wasn't fine, not even close. How could she be, when a piece of her past she thought was long gone was sitting just a few feet away, waiting for her judgment? When court resumed, the room was packed. Reporters scribbled in notepads. The court clerk sorted papers. The prosecutor, a sharp and serious man named Richard Powell, stood confidently at the front. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Powell began, his tone clear and firm.
This case is about violence. It's about a man who walked into a convenience store and, without warning, attacked an innocent clerk and stole money from the register. The evidence will show that James Anderson is guilty.
Eleanor's stomach tightened.
Powell's words were cold and distant, as if James was nothing more than a name on a file. She glanced over at James. He stared down at the table, still and silent. Then the defense attorney, Lisa Porter, rose to speak. She was young but sure of herself. Her voice carried across the courtroom with strength.
"The prosecution wants you to believe this case is simple, but it's not," she said. "My client, James Anderson, has said he's innocent from the start. We will show that the story told the night of the arrest doesn't hold up when looked at closely."
The first witness was called, the store clerk who had been there the night of the incident. He said a man matching James's description had come into the store, argued with the cashier, and then jumped over the counter. His story was full of detail, but something about it felt practiced. Lisa's cross-examination was sharp and focused. "Mr. Chambers," she began, "you said the man who attacked the clerk was wearing a red hoodie. Is that correct?" "Yes," he replied. "Did you see his face clearly?" "Not really. It was dark, and he had the hood up." Lisa nodded, walking slowly. "So you're saying you couldn't say for sure who it was?" "Well, no, but—" "No further questions," Lisa cut in, stepping away. Eleanor noticed James shift slightly in his seat. His shoulders straightened, as if the witness exchange had given him a small spark of hope. Next came a key piece of evidence, a surveillance video from the store. The footage was grainy and poorly lit, showing a person in a red hoodie walking into the store. The prosecution claimed it was James, but the video quality was too poor to clearly identify anyone. Eleanor watched closely. Could that really be James? The figure in the video moved fast, reaching across the counter before disappearing off-screen. The video cut off suddenly, leaving a gap in the story that no one could fill. James's defense was based on an alibi. He said he had been walking home from a friend's house during the robbery, but the friend was too scared to testify, afraid of backlash from people in the neighborhood. Lisa argued that the friend's fear didn't mean James was guilty, but Eleanor could see the doubt in the jury's faces. As the trial continued, Eleanor felt the pressure of her role more than ever. She was supposed to stay neutral, to be fair. But how could she, when every moment reminded her of their childhood, when the man on trial had once been her best friend? Now, he was fighting for his freedom, and she was the one who would help decide his fate. When court ended for the day, Eleanor stayed seated. Her fingers brushed the edges of the gavel, lost in thought. She wanted to talk to James, to look him in the eye and ask what had really happened. But she couldn't. Judges weren't allowed to speak to defendants outside the courtroom. Doing so could ruin the case and her career. As she watched James being led away in chains, something inside her cracked. She had always believed in the justice system, believed that it could find the truth. But now, for the first time, she wasn't so sure. The room was filled with quiet tension as the trial reached a turning point. It was time for the defense to present their side. Lisa Porter stood and called her first key witness, Officer Daniel Harris, the cop who had arrested James. Eleanor leaned in, paying close attention. If there were holes in the case, this was the moment they might appear. Officer Harris was a large man with a rough attitude. He took the stand, and Lisa approached him calmly. "Officer Harris," she began, "you're the one who arrested my client, right?" "That's right," he replied, his voice short and firm. "You said in your report that Mr. Anderson was walking about 2 blocks from the store when you stopped him. Is that correct?" "Yes." "What made you think he was the suspect?" Harris shifted in his seat. "He matched the description. Black male, mid-40s, wearing dark clothes." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Dark clothes? But wasn't the person in the video wearing a red hoodie?" "Yes," he said. "Did you find a red hoodie on Mr. Anderson when you searched him?" Harris paused. "No, but he could have thrown it away." Lisa took a step closer. "Could have? Did you, or any officer, search the area for the hoodie?" Harris's jaw tightened. "No, we didn't have time. We got him pretty fast." Lisa kept pushing. "So, just to be clear, you arrested my client based on a vague description with no physical evidence linking him to the robbery." The silence that followed said everything. Eleanor glanced at the jury. A few jurors looked at one another, their faces unsure. But Lisa wasn't done. "Officer Harris, do you remember what Mr. Anderson said when you arrested him?" "He said he was innocent," Harris replied. "Did you look into that? Or did you just assume he was guilty because of how he looked?" Harris's face turned red. "I followed protocol," he said firmly. Lisa echoed the words, a tone cool. "Protocol." She gave a slight nod. "No further questions, Your Honor." As Harris stepped down, the courtroom buzzed. His credibility had taken a serious hit. Eleanor's heart pounded. This was no longer just a trial. It felt like a reckoning, not just for James, but for the whole system that had been too quick to judge him. Then, Lisa made an unexpected move. She called a forensic expert to the stand. The analyst had reviewed the store surveillance video and explained that the figure in the footage couldn't be clearly identified based on height and build. More importantly, the timestamp had been changed, raising serious questions about the video's reliability. The prosecutor tried to dismiss the testimony as speculation, but the jury looked unsettled. A shadow of doubt filled the room, and Eleanor felt its weight. As the day ended, James chose to testify. Lisa had warned him of the risks, but he insisted. The room was silent as he walked to the stand, his chains softly clinking. His voice was quiet but filled with raw emotion. "I've made mistakes," James began, looking at the jury. "I've trusted the wrong people. I've gone down the wrong roads, but I didn't do this. That night I was just walking home. The police didn't ask me anything, they just saw me and decided I was guilty." His voice cracked.
I've spent my whole life trying to be seen as more than what people assume about me. I'm tired. I just want the truth to matter." Eleanor's throat tightened. His words weren't just a defense. They were a plea for justice, for dignity, for humanity. She looked at the jurors. Their faces were filled with doubt, empathy, and uncertainty. This trial had become more than just facts and evidence. It had become a test of conscience, of whether justice could still mean something real. Eleanor reminded herself she wasn't just a judge to enforce the law. She had to interpret it with compassion, with integrity. On the final day, tension hung heavy in the air. Both sides gave their closing arguments. The prosecutor stuck to his case, urging the jury to trust the system. Lisa, calm but passionate, asked them to look deeper, to see the man behind the accusations, to notice the gaps in the story. Eleanor listened closely. She couldn't influence the jury, but if their decision wasn't clear, she would have the final say. Hours passed as the jury deliberated. People came and went. Some stretched their legs, others whispered quietly. James sat still, his hands folded tightly. He hadn't looked at Eleanor since the trial began, and she understood why. What could she possibly say to make any of this easier? Finally, the bailiff returned. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson stood, paper in hand, hands shaking. "In the case of the state of Louisiana versus James Anderson, we find the defendant—" The pause was unbearable. "Not guilty." Gasps and whispers filled the room. Some people even clapped softly. Eleanor tapped her gavel. Order returned, but the moment still lingered. James's shoulders dropped. The weight was gone, but his face didn't show joy. His freedom had come at a cost. Eleanor addressed the court. "The jury has spoken. Mr. Anderson, you are free to go. Court is adjourned." The room emptied. Eleanor stayed behind, watching James as he signed the release forms. For a moment, she thought he might leave without saying anything. But then, he turned. He walked toward her slowly, stopping just a few feet from the bench. His face was calm but guarded. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But I just want to know, why didn't you say anything? You knew me." Eleanor felt a lump rise in her throat. "Because I couldn't," she said softly. "I had to be fair. If I said anything, it could have ruined the case." James looked at her, hurt but also understanding. "Fair," he repeated. "That's the thing, Eleanor. The world's never been fair. Not for people like me." She looked down at the polished wood of the bench. "You're right. I wish I had done more back then. And now." James sighed. The tension in his shoulders softened. "We were kids. We didn't know any better, but you know now, don't you?" "I do," Eleanor said. Her voice was steady. "And I'm sorry." James gave a small nod. Then he turned and walked away, back straight, as he disappeared through the courthouse doors. Eleanor sat alone, his words still ringing in her mind. She had done her duty, but the trial had taught her something deeper. Justice isn't just about rules and evidence. It's about the lives affected by a system far bigger than any one person. For Eleanor, this was a wake-up call. Her role wasn't just about power. It was a chance to create change. As she stepped outside that evening, the sun casting long shadows across the courthouse steps, Eleanor made herself a quiet promise. She couldn't change the past, but she would do everything she could to make sure the future wasn't just filled with empty promises of fairness. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even be possible. But she owed it to James and to herself to try.